All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, The Basics of Mayflower Research. My name is Kathleen McKenzie, Education and Programming Manager here at American Ancestors, and I will be your moderator for today's session. This program is brought to you by the Brew Family Learning Center. American Ancestors is a nonprofit organization supported by our members and donors. We provide resources and expertise in nearly all aspects of family history, and we're pleased to offer such programming for our members and friends around the world. Our presenter today is Senior Genealogist Melanie McComb. Melanie holds a BS from the State University of New York at Oswego. She is an international lecturer who teaches on a variety of topics, including colonial through 20th century American military research, genetic genealogy, Atlantic Canadian, African American, Jewish, and Irish genealogy. She is also an honorary fellow of the Massachusetts Historical Society. She has had articles published in American Ancestors magazine and 50 Plus Advocate. She is also a blogger known as the Shamrock Genealogist. Now, more than 400 years ago, the Mayflower landed on the shores of Massachusetts with 102 passengers aboard. Today, there are an estimated 35 million Mayflower descendants worldwide. In today's online lecture, Melanie will discuss the foundations of researching your Mayflower ancestors, including key resources, verifying and documenting your line, applying to the General Society of Mayflower Descendants, and more. At any point during today's presentation, please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A panel found at the bottom of your screen. We'll address as many as we can at the end of today's presentation. There is also an optional syllabus available for purchase if you are interested, and your purchase helps support us in making these free webinars. This presentation is also being recorded for later viewing on our website and our YouTube channel. So if you miss something on today's first listen, don't worry, you can always go back and review the presentation later. All right, without further ado, I'll turn things over to Melanie.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm excited to be talking about all things Mayflower during this webinar. We're going to start off with some historical context, go into some of those geographical hot and cold spots to see if you have a Mayflower passenger, talk about how to verify your line, and look at some different resources on our website, as well as some other online resources. So let's begin. So when we talk about the Mayflower and Plymouth colony, we have to go all the way back to looking at what was actually going on in England they actually before they actually had reached our shores. So after Henry VIII had declared himself the head of the Church of England, there was obviously a separation in what religion was being practiced. And there was a sect of Protestantism that was called Calvinism that had arose out of Protestantism in England. And so they were called English Calvinists, and they largely were persecuted by the royalty of England at that time. They very much were viewed as being more radical, and so much so that they were actually being fined if they tried to attend their own church services, and several of them had actually been imprisoned in England at this time if they had multiple fines. So there had needed to be a reason to find religious freedom for their particular group. So they decided to seek out looking at places like the Netherlands. And we start to see different congregations start to assemble and make plans to head towards the Netherlands. And it's estimated that in 1609, there were approximately 100 that stayed and actually settled in Leiden, which is about 25 miles from Amsterdam. And that was after there was a group that had originally come to Amsterdam before. So they were joining even earlier congregations that had also sought out that freedom in the Netherlands. But a lot of the settlers, when they were there, felt that they were losing their identity as Englishmen. They found that even their children were not adopting their English ways. They were starting to learn more Dutch language and trying to be incorporated in the culture of the Netherlands, and just felt like that was really at odds with who they were. And there also was a military coup that was occurring at this time, so there was very much a fear for their personal safety to even stay. So there were a lot of discussions at this time of looking at places to settle in the New World, in what we call, which is now the United States. Looking at places like Virginia, especially, was where a lot of the land patents were being issued out to allow them to settle. So in 1620 is when the settlers that decided to leave Leiden had actually then had to depart by canal, and then they would go to England. They picked up some more passengers. Some passengers actually decided not to continue on, and then they departed on the ship, the Speedwell. Well, you're probably asking, well, why the Speedwell? Aren't we talking about the Mayflower? Well, originally the Speedwell was going to be an accompanying sister ship that was going to depart at the same time as the Mayflower, and they both were going to go towards Virginia together. But then they found that after the ship shortly left Southampton in August of 1620, that the ship was not as seaworthy as they thought. It actually started to take on water, and they had to go back to return to England for repairs on that ship and even some minor repairs on the Mayflower as well. So then the passengers that decided to continue their journey boarded the Mayflower. And keeping in mind, there were several that actually did decide to remain back in England and may have and had went to the New World later, and a lot of times. There was one man I know for sure, like Robert Cushman was one of those men that decided to stay back. This painting is actually showing you a depiction of what the departure of the Pilgrims from Delfshaven in Netherlands looked like, of basically getting out onto these different canals and getting onto the boats. So just to give you some facts about the Mayflower, so it was built approximately around 1605 and was purchased by Christopher Jones, who became the captain of the ship. And this is the dimensions of what you see, what the ship looks like today, and this is actually a painting that depicts what it might have looked like. So from stem to stern, it's only about 80 feet, 12 feet at the back, and there were certain areas that were just off limits to the passengers because largely these ships were really known for transporting cargo and not so much people. And even at the widest part, you're only talking about 24 feet. So not a very large ship. This is actually a cutaway view of what the Mayflower 2, which was meant to be a model of what the Mayflower looked like. It was basically a replica that was done in 1956. And this really kind of shows you how the ship would have been laid out. And just imagining that this is now 102 people are packed in. And originally, it was probably supposed to be closer to half of that based on they were supposed to be coming over on the Speedwell as well. So they were pretty much crammed very much into every corner possible of space along with the crew as well. So to give an idea, I mean, when we look at something like the Titanic, which had transported so much more people at that time, they had multiple levels. You could think that the Mayflower, even in just size, was maybe a fraction of what even steerage would have been like for like like a Titanic ship liner. So it was definitely not big, and we always keep hearing about stories of someone coming over in the Mayflower, and but there was only really a very small group of people. So if we really had as many people that said they might have had someone on the Mayflower, maybe it would have looked something bigger like the Titanic. But just so keep in mind that we're really talking about a much smaller cargo ship of what was available. So as I mentioned, there were 102 passengers that had sailed on the Mayflower, and there were 102 arrived. This is actually a depiction of just some of the different families. We did this graphic up when we were commemorating the 400th anniversary of the Mayflower, giving you an idea of some of the families or individuals that would have accompanied on this journey. Now, when we think about the makeup of the passengers, and we know a lot of them were pursuing this idea of religious freedom, or what we call them as, quote, the separatists or the saints. These are the ones that were actively opposing the practices of the Church of England, and these were largely made up about two-thirds of the passengers that had fled. Now, the other remaining third were what we call the strangers. These were the people that were more of the merchants that were trying to leave for economic reasons. Thinking about how much money would have had to be involved with to make this journey, you find that a lot of these families were usually pretty well off, the ones that were able to afford this passage. And yes, there were even other passengers that were not human on board. There were dogs and goats and chickens, and there was even estimated there were probably were some cats on there as well. Probably very helpful for catching some of the mice on board. And there were even different births and deaths. So like I mentioned that there was 102 that had departed, 102 that arrived. Well, there was one passenger that died at sea, William Button. This is actually his gravestone that shows that commemorates his death. And there was one child, Oceanus Hopkins, that was born listed here. And he was the child of Stephen Hopkins and his wife Elizabeth. And his name Oceanus is very much an homage to the ocean that they came over on. So the journey to Plymouth, or even though it was originally not meant to go to Plymouth, um, was was not an easy journey. They had departed from England on September 6, 1620, and they encountered so much storms during this 66-day voyage before they finally had decided to um to disembark their ship. And to give you an idea of how much of the conditions were going on, I'll read this excerpt from Bradford's History of the Plymouth Settlement regarding John Halland. If you were a John Halland descendant, well, he almost didn't make it. And so it says, one says that they thus lay at Hull in a terrible storm. A strong young man called John Halland, coming on deck, was thrown into the sea. But it pleased God that he caught hold of the topsail halyards which hung overboard and ran out at length, but he kept his hold, though he was several fathoms under water, till he was hauled up by the rope, and then with a boat hook helped into the ship and saved. So, as you can see, he had a very close call, but that gives you an idea of how much the storms were really rocking the boat across the waves that you very easily could be thrown overboard. So when we talk about how when they started coming into the New World, we started to see when the ship was starting to come here. They decided to stop and explore the Cape Cod and Plymouth Harbor to seek out if there was a place that they could stop. Based on the journey, they were not able to continue to move on towards Virginia, so they really were taking this time to survey the area and determine where they could go. By December 15th to 16th is when the Mayflower had decided to leave Provincetown and sail on to Plymouth. So Plymouth wasn't even originally the first place that the boat had stopped at. It was actually a decision that they had made later on after doing their surveys. So just to give you an idea of how far Provincetown and Plymouth is, I've just used this Google Maps view just to give you an idea of around Cape Cod Bay, you have Provincetown and Plymouth, and you have this nice ring. So it's not a terribly far distance, but it gives you an idea of how they really were further offshore when they were stopping before they decided to move more inland into Plymouth. And arriving in Cape Cod in November of 1620, this came from Mort's relation, where they had basically shared what it was like. So they had said that we would not come near the shore by 3/4 of an English mile because of shallow water, which was a great prejudice to us. For our people going on shore were forced to wade a bowshot or two in going inland, which caused many to get colds and coughs, for it was nigh times freezing cold weather. So even though it seemed like it was very close to where they could depart, they had to still go through and wade through this water in order to even make these surveys of land. So you can get an idea that they were probably not very used to this type of weather at this time. And as we know, the weather got very cold and really terrible after the first winter, when many people did not survive. And you may be curious, well, we hear about the infamous Plymouth Rock. Well, that's it. It is not a very large rock. This is just the rock that is used as the tourist site that you can go to in Plymouth. There are historians that are arguing about if that is, quote, the actual rock that they stepped out onto, and that just might have been a commemorative statue that was basically put in its place, just to note the event. But that is it. It is not a very large boulder or something you would probably see that would be more striking of something that you would find for the story of the Mayflower. So because they did not depart in Virginia, they needed to make some rules and come up with some provisional government here until they could engage with having a longer term grant of the land and the charters. So they had the Mayflower Compact signed when the Mayflower was anchored in Provincetown, Massachusetts. And it's a myth that people say that it was actually done in Plymouth, but it was actually done much earlier on when they were first anchored in November of 1620. And this had outlined the rules of the colony at this time while they were starting to create a new government. Plymouth's first governor, who was elected, was John Carver. He had served in November 1620. He was elected, and then again of 1621. He had actually died in April after a very long, hot day, and then he was succeeded by William Bradford, who then became the next governor of Plymouth. There was this is just a note, the first marriage that occurred in Plymouth Colony. Then that was Edward Winslow and Susanna Jackson White. They were both widowed at the time when they got married during the first winter. And the ceremony took place on May 12th, 1621. And just to give you an idea of how devastating the first winter was, of the 102 survived, half survived. 102 that came over, only half survived. And that included even of them, even only four of the married women actually were the ones that survived. So a lot of the women that did survive were not married at the time, they were single or young girls. And so the married women that did survive included Elizabeth Hopkins, Eleanor Billington, Susanna White Winslow, and Mary Brewster. And there were even different children that had to become wards, for example. For example, if we think about Mary Chilton, both of her parents had actually died, and she was either a ward that historians say of either John Alden or Miles Standish. So these four women, along with any of the older female children, would then responsible for the 3-day harvest feast. So thinking about that first Thanksgiving that was being held with Massasoit and his Indian men at that time. So that would have been a lot of work, obviously, for them to have to produce this. And it's estimated that there was 52 English that were at that feast, as Peregrine White was actually born later after their arrival. Now, there's a myth that goes out that I've seen a lot online, especially, that people say, like, well, didn't the Mayflower return and make another journey back? And it's like, no. So there was not a second run of the Mayflower. There were additional ships that came over later. The second ship that came after was, I believe, the Fortune, which came a year later. But no, the Mayflower itself actually went back to England. And in 1624, it actually went up for an appraisal going through a probate process, and it was described that it was in ruins. And a lot of people believe that it was probably broken up for scrap, taking all the timber out. And there are some historians that even argue that it might have been used to construct a barn in Jordan's England. So just keep that in mind that there is nothing left of the original Mayflower. Anything that you've seen out there that says it's the Mayflower, it's probably like something like Mayflower 2 or 3 or some replica that was being done later on. Now, to learn more about some of the different passengers and also interact with a very nice timeline that we've developed, you can actually turn to the website that we developed in 2020 called that is mayflower.americanancestors.org. Here is where you can learn about each of the different passengers. You can also learn about the different members of the Wampanoag tribe as well, search some of the databases, learn about different events, and there's even a store for Mayflower specific products as well. So on this website, one of the things you can do on Meet the Passengers is you can actually interact with some of these statistics. So if you wanted to see how many of them were the women in the group, the men, the children, if you were curious if any of them were indentured servants, who were crew members, who had died the first year, who returned to Europe, and who even left descendants. You can toggle on each of those different radio buttons and then it will highlight the different names that are relevant. So, for example, if I went to click on the radio button next to servants, I show 14 names that are noted here. And so one of the ones that might be the most notable of here is Edward Doty. You also can click into each of the individual passengers, and it will even give you a biography. And these biographies are coming from the book The Pilgrim Migration, which was written by Robert Charles Anderson. So each of these biographies is going to give you some details about what's known about them, about where they came from in England, maybe what their occupation was. In this case, John Alden was a cooper, so he made barrels. He also was a crew member on the Mayflower. It noted that he decided to, even though he was a crew member, he decided to stay instead of returning. And he even served in different political roles as treasurer and assistant governor. And then, of course, we see that his marriage to Priscilla Mullins and that they had 10 children together. Okay, so now that we've given you some historical context, let's talk about some of the geographical hot cold spots to know if you have a Mayflower ancestor in your family. So when we say hot and cold spots, I want you to think about maybe that game that you might have played as a child or maybe with your children or grandchildren. When you think about, you're finding something maybe in your home and you tell them if they're getting closer, they're getting warmer, they're getting warmer. And if you're farther away, you're getting colder, you're colder. So use that same idea. So generally, as a cold spot, one example is Essex County, Massachusetts. And that was because Massachusetts Bay Colony was a completely separate colony and government from Plymouth Colony. And you don't find a lot of interaction between the two. Now, there can be some exceptions. That you might find, but for the most part, you generally are not going to find a Mayflower ancestor in Essex County if you have ancestors going back that far. So that is one cold spot example. Now, for a hot spot, we don't necessarily need to think about they have to just be in Plymouth County, Massachusetts. We might look at the surrounding area. So you notice that a lot of the ring of where they were first had departed in Provincetown and Cape Cod is you're right in the area of Barnstable County, Massachusetts, the neighboring county. And that's a really good hot spot that we find a lot of Mayflower passengers and their descendants that may have had family go to after leaving Plymouth Colony. So here's a more complete chart, and this is also going to be in the paid handout as well. So when you're looking at generations 1 through 5, with starting from the Mayflower passenger, you're largely finding your hotspots are very close to Plymouth. So you got Plymouth, you got Barnstable County, you even have nearby New London, Connecticut. Rhode Island, especially in the Little Compton area, and coastal Maine. Your cold spots are going to be, besides Essex County, Mass, is Quebec, Pacific Canada. So thinking about anything that's really going out more west. Other parts of Connecticut, such as Hartford, New Haven, and Fairfield, and Providence, Rhode Island. Now, as you move through the next few generations, so after you leave in the 1600s, 1740s, you're getting into generations 6 to 10, which is going through approximately 1750s to 1880s, where your hotspots are now showing up as it could be anywhere like Western Massachusetts, the Midwest, New York State, but not New York City, Vermont, Maine, and even parts of Atlantic Canada, such as Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. There's not really a lot of cold spots at this time because we are seeing this westward migration happening. And it's even less dependent on geography when we get into generations 11 to 15, where we really start to see families all over the United States and Canada. So you could even have Mayflower descendants all the way out in places like California and elsewhere, because there have been so many generations removed that it's not going to have an impact on finding someone. So generations 11 to 15, really anybody could be anywhere. It's really when you look at the earlier generations is where there's going to be a real difference. So let's talk about how you can verify your line back to a Mayflower passenger. So here's some steps that we recommend to get started. First is you want to get organized and understand that you have all of your research in front of you. And that's when I think you want to start to map out that your ancestry and put it down into some kind of like a five generation chart or a software program or something, just so you can easily outline all the different people in your ancestors. So you want to make sure you have their names, including maiden names for the women. You want to have their birth and death dates and marriage dates if known, and you want the locations as well. That's really going to be key, is those locations, especially as you go further back. And then you want to then look at who might be your best candidates using those geographical hotspots. So as you go further back into your tree and you start finding people that are starting to live very close to Plymouth or those other hotspots, those are going to be the lines that you're going to want to really start to dig into more, because you might have a better chance of finding a Mayflower passenger. And then what you want to do is you want to make sure that you are connecting each generation with at least one type of document. And you want to use primary documentation as much as possible. I would not rely on published genealogies without sources or county histories or mug books, because there are usually no sources cited. So you want to use those vital records, your birth, marriage, and death records. You want to look at probate records like wills and other state files, land deeds, church records, anything that is a primary document that's going to possibly list relationships and help you tie those generations together. So even if you find at least one document to connect back, it at least gives you a possible chain to look into. So on our website, on AmericanAncestors.org, we have a page for research templates where you can download a five-generation chart and other documents. So here's an example of what we call the five-generation chart, where you can start with yourself in number one, and then the way it's listed is you list your father's side on top and your mother's side on the bottom. It was a chart created by a man, so that is the process. Apologies, ladies. And it basically asks you for the name, the birth and death dates, the marriage dates, and the locations. And you can then use as many of these as possible when you're trying to go into those lines to keep adding backwards as much as you can. But this way, it gives you a nice way of looking at a glance of, okay, well, which side of the family am I going to focus on, and which branches look the most promising that I want to dig into next? Also on our website, we have a free research guide on documenting your Mayflower lineage, which includes items such as the chart, as well as other information on how to look into different vital records and a brief list of sources as well. We also have a free download that you can obtain from our website on obtaining a copy of Proving Your Mayflower Ancestry. So you can actually use this link at the bottom here and ask for a free download to come to your email. And you just fill out your name and email address. So let's say after you've kind of documented a potential line and you're considering maybe joining the General Society of Mayflower Descendants. This is the lineage society that many people join when they've identified a Mayflower passenger in their family tree. So when you've identified someone, what I'd like to recommend you do is first you're going to outline that list of who that Mayflower line is. And then what I would recommend doing is submitting what we call a lineage match. So this is basically a chart similar to the 5 generation chart where you outline each generation down from the passenger to you and you list their names and their spouses. And this is a paid service. You do submit it to GSMD. And they basically can look at that line and they'll tell you within a few weeks or so if any portion of your line has already been approved as an approved descendant in the society where someone has joined. And that's really good because you might find that there are some tricky generations in the middle after generation 5, let's say. Usually people get stuck in the middle around generations, I would say 6 to 8 or so. That can really help to cut down because if someone has already figured out part of that line and says, well, we only really need you up through maybe your great grandparents and the rest of the line is good because it's already been approved, that's going to save you so much time and potentially even money as well to have to obtain all those different documents. So then once you've heard back from GSMD on if the line is ready to go or if it's a brand new line, you then want to work with your Mayflower State historian and complete the application from their website. And so each state is going to have their own Mayflower State historian, and they're going to be ones to really help you go through that process. And I've seen some historians, some are more active than others. They may be able to help advise where to find resources if you're getting stuck before you submit it to the national group. And if you're really getting stuck with figuring out, well, I don't know if I can identify a Mayflower pastor, I don't have the time, or I just want someone to fill out the paperwork on my behalf, or both, you actually can hire our research services team. And they actually can do both of those as separate projects, and you can contact them for a quote if you're interested. Now, with many of the Mayflower passengers, there also are Mayflower passengers that are in different presidents' family trees as well. So these are some of the ones that have been identified, and you can find more in different books by, like, let's say, Gary Boyd Roberts, where he wrote up about different presidential genealogies and notable Mayflower descendants. But you can get a sense of like there could be multiple here. So if you know you have a one of these presidents in your family tree, for example, that might be someone to look into because you might have identified a potential Mayflower passenger if, let's say, you have Zachary Taylor in your tree, you know he has a William Brewster and Isaac Allerton line. And it's not uncommon that when you find someone has a passenger in their tree, they also may have a multiple as well. Like, for example, I find that people have like John Alden usually have at least maybe 2 or 3 others sometimes. Richard Warren's another one that comes up a lot in different ones, Francis Cook, John Howland. So sometimes you might find that there's usually a group of people that always come up, and that also because happens is that some of these passengers, their descendants also later intermarry other descendants. And you may find that a lot of notable people out there actually do have Mayflower ancestry, including people like Taylor Swift, Marilyn Monroe, Avril Lavigne, Ellen. So there's Christopher Reeve, for example. There's a lot of people that you can find that actually have Mayflower ancestry. And like Kathleen mentioned, it's estimated that, based on different statistics that we've gathered, that approximately 10 million Americans and 35 million worldwide have some form of Mayflower ancestry in their family tree. So it is very likely that if you have any family part of your family that goes back into colonial America, that you may have a Mayflower line somewhere along the way. So let's talk about some of the different resources that exist on our website to learn more. So we're going to start off with the Mayflower families. Now, a very common resource that we hear about is what we call the silver books. They're called silver books because the binding on the books is actually silver. So they're actually bound in these lovely silver volumes, and these are considered, quote, not the gold standard, pun intended, of basically the Mayflower passengers going out to the fifth generation and sometimes out to the sixth generation. Now, we have these books in our library, and what I want to note is that we do have a database on our website that allows us to publish the fifth generation of these books. Due to copyright, we don't have permission to put generations 1 through 4. So keep that in mind that when you're going to our website, you're seeing generation 5 and sometimes 5 on, and that's it. You're not seeing the earlier ones. So you may need to go to your local library to review the generations 1 through 4 if you're trying to look at those sketches. But generation 5 will list the direct ancestors that go back to the passenger, and I'll show you what that looks like. So this is the database that's set up on our website, Mayflower Families Fifth Generation Descendants, and you'll notice that when I'm in this volume, which is under William Brewster, and it's showing that fifth generation, this Rebecca Burgess. In parentheses, and you'll notice that she is listed with a superscript 5, that it's listing out the line. So it's showing that Rebecca Burgess is the daughter of Patience Freeman, who is the daughter of Rebecca Prince, who is the daughter of Patience Brewster, who is the daughter of William Brewster. So even though you don't have generations 1 through 4, you can at least see at a glance what is the line look like. And that might help. And then you can use other resources that I'll show you shortly how you can find out and list that line out more. So here's the database, Mayflower Families Fifth Generation Descendants, 1700 to 1880. So I'm going to do a search now for a Joshua Palmer. So you can search by name, you can add years, you can add locations, you can even add in family members such as parents or spouse. In this example, I found one that looked interesting to me. I found a Joshua Palmer with a marriage to Lydia Waterman. And perhaps maybe that was our first record indicating that we knew that was someone in our tree, as we had identified maybe a marriage that happened. So if we click on that link, we can get a little more information about him. And we can see that his parents were listed as Samuel Palmer and Ann Palmer. We then have the digitized page from the Silver Books that we can look at. So we can go and click on View to view the page. And from there, it actually then lists. So in this case, actually, Joshua Palmer is appearing in a Silver Book for Isaac Allerton based on his wife's ancestry. So it's really that any children they would have gone through, it's actually going through the wife's line. So Lydia is the daughter of Lydia Cushman, who is the daughter of Elkanah, who is the son of Mary, who's the daughter of Isaac Allerton. And here you can see that here's where they married. They married in Halifax in 1740, and notes that Joshua was baptized in Scituate, Massachusetts on July 22nd, 1716, and had died in Halifax in 1794 at the age of 79. And he was the son of Samuel and Anne Clark Palmer. And you'll notice that sometimes the maiden names may not always appear in the index, so always good to look at the image to see what details are there. Another thing you can do in this database is, let's say you knew a particular volume you were interested in. You can actually use the right-hand side to go into the specific volume you're interested in, and then enter the page number if you have that and click Browse, and that will take you right to the page. So in this example, you'll see each of the volumes are going to be based on the different Mayflower passengers or crew. And you can then see that some of them are going to be broken out into different volumes based on which children they go through. So in some of them, it's so large, like William Brewster, Edward Doty, and others, they had to split them out into different volumes. So this one here will take you into William Brewster for the Mayflower Families in Progress book for through daughter Patience. And here you can see, again, more of a fuller page of this sketch here. So we see information on Rebecca Burgers that we saw before, who she married, and it may include multiple marriages that could have occurred, or if her husband had remarried. And then it even notes down their children. And you're going to see that there are going to be citations for each of the different sources as well. So at the end of each chapter, at the end of each sketch, you're going to see a references, which is going to give you the citations for each of the items that you saw in that sketch. These are going to include vital records, journal articles, probate records, deeds, and more. Now, another database that we were excited to partner with GSMD on is approved Mayflower applications. So we actually contracted with the General Society of Mayflower Descendants to upload approved membership applications for anyone that was born 1920 or earlier. So that's why you see that date frame going from 1620 to 1920. So perhaps you have someone in your family that may have joined the General Society of Mayflower Descendants, such as a maybe a parent, a grandparent, or great-grandparent. You could actually try searching for someone in your family line more recently and see if perhaps they might have joined as well and be able to see their application. So this gives a description again, talking about what the database is accounting for. So it includes all applicants before January 1st, 1920. It includes their information on their application, their membership number, as well as cites the sources that are being used. So let's say I was going to search for a Nathaniel Jenks in this database. I found an entry for Nathaniel Jenks with a death date of 1741 in Providence, and his spouse was noted as Lydia Arnold. When we click into the entry, we can then see a little more information. So it gives some of the sources here. It's referencing the Mayflower descendant and different vital records. It's noting that Nathaniel is in generation 4 of the line, down from John Howland. And he's a John Howland volume, so they know John Howland is the Mayflower passenger. And if we go into view, you can then view the approved application. These applications are usually about, I would say, at least like 4 to 5, maybe more pages. So they're going to include like this approved application for a membership. It'll include who actually is applying, including their details and down to their address. And as you go through it, you're eventually going to get to the application. Now, in this case, this is a supplemental. So this person is already a member of the GSMD, and they're just doing a supplemental for additional passengers that they want to document, though. So sometimes you might find the supplemental application might be a little shorter than if it's one for their first time applying. And each of the details are going to list down from John Howland down to his children and their children, going down into birth, marriages, and deaths being documented, as well as locations. So here's a little bit of a close-up here that you can see. And this actually is showing you the sources that are being cited. Now, the original proofs are not included with the applications. They're still going to be with the GSMD library, but you can at least use the citations to go back to the sources. And in a lot of cases, you'll find that they have included the volume and page number. And you may find a lot of these resources, like Arnold's Vital Records, are right on our website, for example. And otherwise, you might need to consult things like Family Search and elsewhere for other resources. But I like that it outlines each of the different generations, what the sources were used. So that may be another point of trying to help verify your research. Let's talk about the ancestry trees that have also been created. So we have a tree product called Ancestry Trees, and we've actually created Ancestry Trees for the Mayflower passengers. So when you actually go on the Mayflower Descendants membership applications, what you want to do is you want to scroll all the way down to the bottom. So you're going to scroll past the database search, scroll past the description, and then you'll see a list of the different passengers that we have trees for. And you'll notice that some of them might be broken down into multiple trees. So if we look at John Alden, we see that there are 2 trees. One is part 1 that goes through children Mary, Priscilla, Elizabeth, John, and Joseph. And part 2 is for his other children, Sarah, Jonathan, Ruth, David, and Rebecca. You can actually click into these trees to see who is listed. So when you click into these trees, you can actually use the arrows next to the passenger, as you see on the left-hand side next to him, or I like to use the search bar at the very top. This is very helpful where you could go ahead and search a surname in the tree. So let's say I wanted to see if someone was documented within generations 1 through 5, and sometimes even 6 or 7. to see if it's included. And so let's say we're going to do a search now. So I wanted to see if maybe the surname Bartlett shows up and see if they show up anywhere in the first earlier generations. And so let's say I was searching on Bartlett. I find a Sarah Bartlett that I'm interested in, 1682 to 1761. So Sarah Bartlett, we see that she's born in 1682 in Duxbury, Mass. She died in 1761 in Plymouth. And it notes here her parents were Benjamin Bartlett and Ruth uh, Peabody. It notes that her marriage was in 1701 to Israel Bradford in Plymouth. And it even documents their children as well as it goes through. So, as you go through the different sources, as you go through the different life events, you also will find that there might be sources cited. So if we see this link next to Sarah Bartlett, we see that there is a link for Esther Littleford Woodforth Barnes, Alicia Crane Williams, Mayflower Families. So it's even going to cite some of the books that she might be referenced in her study projects. So as I expand this, I then can see the citations much more clearly. So we can see that there's an entry for her through Mayflower Families through 5 generations. So that's Silver Books. It also and there also might be other sources as well. It even gives you the page numbers, so you could go right to that page. So the trees are going to incorporate approved Mayflower membership applications as well as the information in the Silver Books. Let's talk about some other places for Mayflower scholarship. When we were getting ready for the 400th anniversary, we had a special commemorative issue of American Ancestors magazine, which goes over all things Mayflower that you can actually view on our website, americanancestors.org, where we have an archive. We also have a journal that is produced twice a year in the winter and summer called the Mayflower Descendant. So you may be able to find articles that were done on research of any earlier passengers and crew, such as if their origins in England were known, if there was maybe a question of parentage or spouse that was being confirmed. There's all kinds of really interesting articles, and many of them are even incorporating DNA as well. So the Mayflower Descent is something you can actually you can order with your membership as an extra cost. On our website, we also have the option for different books that you can order to keep up with the latest scholarship. So in our bookstore, we even have a separate section for Mayflower. So you can see that currently in that category, we have about 38 different results. A lot of these are going to include books by Robert Charles Anderson, who is the main lead of the Great Migration Study Project. So things like the Great Migration Directory, the different Great Migration Study Begins, and all the other volumes. Puritan Pedigrees is really great because that talks about a lot of the historical context about what was going on, about why people were going to New England. Mayflower Migration shows you those detailed biographical sketches that we saw earlier, and there's many others. Other additional resources that you want to look for, there is a separate volume set for John Halland of the Mayflower that was published by Picton Press. And then there's other books besides Pilgrim Migration include some online databases. So you may want to think about looking into Plymouth Colony records, such as the church records, there's court records that are available online. I even give links in the handout on deeds and other resources as well. And let's talk about some other online resources that you can use to find out more. One place you may want to go to is the transcripts of the records of New Plymouth Colony. This is a volume set that was transcribed and is on the Secretary of State for Massachusetts website. This 12-volume set is going to go over all things going on about what was happening in Plymouth Colony at this time. So if you want to look into what was going on in the courts, the different laws, the different land deeds, very detailed information that could help you to understand more of the specifics and understand more of the primary documentation that's been published. Another place you can search for is on Ancestry.com. There is a collection of Mayflower births and deaths, volume 1 and 2. This is based on Bowman's research. Bowman has done a number of his research on Mayflower ancestry and donated his files to the General Society of Mayflower Descendants, and a lot of his research has been published. So to give you an example, you may be able to do a search in this collection and may be able to find the different children that were noted here. So this is going to account for people in Plymouth Colony as well that may have some Mayflower ancestry, and you might see some different remarks that are noted about. In this case, you see land deeds, vital records. It notes here that Waitstill Turner, a son of Isaac, was actually noted when he died as a pauper. So you might find some of the transcriptions from the death records also listed here. You also can search on Mayflower deeds and probates. So similar to what you saw for that volume in the original records, you can also see what was been abstracted out specifically on Mayflower deeds and probates, so you can look at civic relationships of those that lived in Plymouth Colony. So in this example, we have the estate of William Chipman. So there is land that is being divided up between the different heirs here. So we can see that there is, for example, there's different guardianships, and all these other people that are connected around him have been bolded, and it shows the relationships between them as well. So consider this as like a nice breadcrumb of an abstract to show you what is actually in the record, and then you could then go into the probate record to see what was actually published there. So in review, I hope that this webinar has shown you that there are a lot of different resources to help you identify if you have a Mayflower passenger in your family tree. Geography is really going to be key when you're looking at those first earlier generations, 1 through 5, looking for those hotspots. And by looking at that, that will definitely help you identify if you have a possible person in your tree. There are a lot of places that you may need to consult, both online and offline, but I hope that we have shown you that there is a tremendous amount of research, and there's not a better time to do Mayflower research than now, where so much more is made accessible. Thank you, and let's turn to some questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Melanie. Before we turn to questions, just a couple of things to note. So first up, I just wanted to quickly run through some upcoming events that may be of interest to you all. So first here is our online seminar on researching and verifying Mayflower ancestry, which of course ties in perfectly to today's topic. This will be a 5-week kind of in-depth course. And that's going to start on October 29th and then go through November as well. We also currently have a online seminar happening called the 17th Century Great Migration to New England and Beyond, Conventicles, Companies, Congregations, Dispersal. So we're kind of midway through that one, but if you were to register for it now, you would receive access to the recordings of the lectures that have already happened. And then you would be able to attend the live sessions happening on the 23rd and the 30th this month. And then finally, we have another free lecture that's going to be offered next month on the 14th called 10 Steps to Writing and Publishing Your Family History. And that will be presented by our Vice President for Publishing, Sharon Buzzell Inglis. All right. And then another quick announcement, I just wanted to let you all know we have a lot of folks who aren't members out there watching. And we are currently offering $25 off membership with the promo code OCT24. So that'll get you $25 off. It's regularly $99.95, but with this, it would be $74.95. And you can see where you can enter that there. If you have any questions about that, you can contact our membership team at membership@nehgs.org, or we have the number there displayed as well. All right, so with all that aside, we've had some great questions coming in. We'll get to as many as we can, but unfortunately won't be able to address everything that's been coming in. But let's dive in here. So first, Melanie, we got a lot of questions from folks wondering about kind of the accuracy of some of the resources highlighted, in particular the silver books and the approved Mayflower applications database. How, can we trust the information that's included there? What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. So I will say that the silver books are much more reliable to be relied on. Now, there's obviously going to be new scholarship that's going to come out as new discoveries keep coming about, as genealogy is very much wet cement, things change. But I would say that they are considered more authoritative unless they've come out with a correction that's been issued out on their website or in different articles, that generally the silver books are probably going to be the most reliable. I will say with the approved membership applications that if you had someone that had applied, closer to, the that 1920 date or so, thinking about that well is over 100 years old. So yes, there could be changes in those lines. Some lines could have been put on hold as new information came in. So that's why I like to recommend that you do that lineage match, because that's really going to show what is the latest and greatest information that someone might have found on your line. So even if there's not an approved application or something in the Silver Book, there might have someone that put an application in within the last couple of years that would have qualified your line, and you basically would be able to graft onto that.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Melanie. Then some other questions about kind of new books that are in the process of being worked on or published.
Mhm.
Is there any progress on the sixth and later generations?
I know that there are the books in progress. I don't know about any particular updates that have been made outside of the ones that we carry in our library. That may be something to contact General Society of Mayflower Descendants to see where they are at with those pink volumes, to see where they are with becoming silver books. Some of those might be taking some time for them to finish, but they will be the best ones to know where they're at.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then someone was wondering if the lists of passengers, that we have available on our website and things like that, do they indicate which of the passengers are, quote, strangers?
That's a good question. So I don't think we have a specific area that says who are strangers. So I'd have to look into that to see if that is documented anywhere. If you'd like to maybe drop a note, I can take a look into that for you at a later point and see if there is anything that does note that, who is considered a saint versus stranger.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Melanie. And then a question here, are the Mayflower Society applications also available on Family Search?
I think that there might be. I don't know if the Mayflower approved applications. I think that we did a partnership with them. Let me double check for you. Approve. I don't know if they are. I think that if there were applications that are on the website, I think that there were some membership records for certain chapters. So I think I saw certain states might have them on there, but I don't think that the same database is available on Family Search. I do know that one thing that we partnered with Family Search on is the trees that you see, the Ancestry Trees available, those do get shared into the genealogy section of Family Search. So those you might be potentially be able to find them that way in Family Search. But the applications themselves, I don't think those are on Family Search. I think there's only just certain state chapters. Like, for example, I know that Massachusetts, for example, is on Family Search. There is definitely at least the indexes, and I think they have the applications as well.
All right, perfect. Thank you. So we also got a lot of questions, Melanie, from folks who said, that they were descended from a particular Mayflower
Okay.
passenger, and they're wondering, is there kind of a way that they might be able to more easily find if they're related to other Mayflower passengers? Do you know if there are any sort of resources out there that show kind of common, shared Mayflower ancestors or anything like that to help those folks?
Yeah, I don't know about a particular article. I mean, one thing I might recommend doing is, for example, is if you go onto like a site like WikiTree, you can do the connection finder. That might be a way to do it, because I think that they have highlighted different Mayflower pastors in the past, so you might be able to look at your connection to them and see if there is a shared ancestor in both ones. I mean, I think I only kind of know just anecdotally certain ones that just keep coming up over and over again, but I don't know if there is one that's a concentrated list. So I think that you might have to try some of them out and maybe look at the ones that may be intermarried in each other. So like for example, like Gregory Priest married Sarah Allerton, who was the sister of Isaac Allerton. So if you look at some of the marriages, you may be able to find some of those connections there where technically you have a connection to Isaac Allerton potentially, and then Gregory Priest. You could look at something like that. There's John Alden and Priscilla Mullins. You know, those are obviously going to interact because they marry each other. So that might be another way to look into that as well.
Okay, great. Thanks, Melanie. We also got some DNA questions, which I'll ask
Okay.
you as our
Okay.
kind of DNA expert
Okay.
here. So, some folks were wondering if there are any verified DNA groups for the Mayflower through companies like Family Tree DNA, and
Yes.
also some questions about if the Mayflower Society accepts DNA as part of an application.
Yes, so they do accept DNA as part of an application. They are largely using Y-DNA though, so looking for direct male descendants. They also do have a mitochondrial DNA project as well that I think they do hope to look into as well, to use that as well, and that possibly could be used too. So I think it's Y-DNA mitochondrial are the only options that they're taking right now. They only take an autosomal generations 1 through 3 if you have like an adoption in your family or like a non-paternal event where you can prove that. So yes, you can use DNA, but it depends on what generation you're using it. The family tree project, I'll just drop that into the chat. That is actually the approved project for those that actually are members. So you do have to be a member to join the group, but you can then document your tree. And there is also actually an article in American Ancestors magazine that documents the Y-DNA and mitochondrial haplogroups for a lot of the passengers. I'm gonna drop that in too as well. And that might be interesting if you have your results back and you want to see if you maybe share at least the same haplogroup as someone in the group if you have potentially that surname in your tree. So I'll share that article as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Melanie.
Yes.
And we probably have time for a couple more questions here. A little bit over time, but we'll squeeze some in. So we had a historical question. Someone
Okay.
was wondering if you know if it was always their intention to settle so far north, in New England.
No, their intention was going towards Virginia, and that's where originally they had the charter to settle. So it really just happened to be because of the weather and the conditions they had to stay where they were.
Okay, great. Another question that I know, is very common among family historians. Any advice on identifying maiden names? Many resources seem to only have the woman's married name, this person says.
I usually like to look at probate records for potential parents of the woman, for example, because that will I possibly, especially if she's already married by the time that one of her parents dies, especially her father, that she may be listed with her married name. That's usually a good tie-in. I also like to look at land deeds as well and make sure you're also looking at all possible vital records, including church records too. So I think all of those are really good ways to identify a possible maiden name.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then maybe kind of a good closing question here. We did get
Sure.
a question from someone who's wondering, do you have any thoughts on why we're all still so kind of fascinated by the Mayflower, that it tends to be something that a lot of folks want to trace back to when, there are other places like Jamestown and things like that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've thought about that too because it definitely has hit a lot of cultural milestones, I think, in the history of our country. And I think because it shows the perseverance of a group of people that were willing to fight for their beliefs or wanted to make a difference and make a living in the new country, that it probably just showed the bravery and the courage of a group of people that wanted to settle a new land and and that many of them did and then but even only about half survive, but then think about how many descendants are there today. So I think it just goes to that spirit of being able to overcome so many difficult circumstances. I think that really may really resonate with a lot of people, and just to maybe show kind of like an earlier even just maybe almost an attitude about how they were fighting a lot of the British norms at the time too, I think in a way, because that kind of resonates with a lot of people that go into like the Revolutionary War. which is also another big moment of study as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Great thoughts on that there. Thank you, Melanie, for answering all of those questions and for your wonderful presentation today. And thank you to all of you out there for your excellent questions. Unfortunately, that is all that we have time for today. I know we had a lot of wonderful questions coming in. So if you do have more specific questions about your family history research, you might consider hiring one of our research services team or using our chat service as well. I highly recommend checking out that free chat service. It puts you in direct communication with one of our genealogists, and it's totally free and open to the public. It's available Monday through Saturday from 9 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And to access that, you just go to americanancestors.org/chat. Again, can't recommend that enough. That would be a great place to take some of your questions today if we weren't able to squeeze them in this afternoon. You can also book a one-on-one consultation with our experts at the link shown here on the screen or through that QR code displayed there as well. I also want to mention that Melanie is one of our genealogists who gives a lot of these consultations. You can even book one directly with her if you'd like to do that. And thank you again for joining us today. As you leave today's webinar, you'll have the opportunity to fill out a survey and give us your feedback. As we continue to expand these webinars and online offerings, any and all feedback is extremely helpful and appreciated. This free webinar was made possible by the generous support of our members and friends around the world. Please consider making a gift to American Ancestors to help keep these programs free and to create more. I hope to see you all at our online programs in the future, and goodbye for now.